Hey, what's up, everybody? So, today I want to get into a little bit of a status update. What is going on in Los Angeles? You may be, if you're a person who watches the news, be hearing some things about how crazy it is in California, how LA has turned into what could probably possibly be described as somewhat of a dystopian nightmare. Well, to a certain extent, that is true. And so I want to tell you some of what I've observed just in the couple of years that I've been here, how the city has been changing rapidly before our eyes, and just provide some anecdotes about what's actually happening right now on the ground in Los Angeles and in many other places in the world too. You've probably noticed if you're at all observant that things are very strange and intense right now. It seems like the world is changing rapidly, and there are all these powerful forces that seem to be hell bent on sort of restructuring society in some way. So I want to start out with the statement that everything in this video is simply my opinion. It's based on anecdotes, stories, and observations from my personal perspective. So just putting that out there. No need to ban me for speaking my mind. All right, so start with an update. So recently, a couple days ago, I took all my art down from a restaurant in Santa Monica. It was one of the few places where I was displaying my art here in town. Really beautiful place called AVO, which stands for All Vegan Organic. Super sweet restaurant, really great people, kind, welcoming every time you go in there. And they were forced to close down suddenly because their business has been completely suffocated by the mandates and restrictions that have been put in place by the government. Not by COVID, by the government. So our governments are now threatening businesses after, again, a year and a half of slowly suffocating them with restrictions. They're now threatening them with exorbitant and rapidly increasing fines for any violation of COVID vaccine passport rules. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's us reverting to a show me your papers, please society, where ordinary citizens need to provide documentation of their legitimacy in order to go out in public and live a normal life in any sort of way. What this is essentially it's a newfangled medical authoritarianism, and it is suffocating businesses. It's creating an in-group, out-group, basically creating a two-tiered society. Creating a society that some people can participate in and some people cannot. This is all due to a medical decision that should be a personal decision made between individuals and their doctors. So this restaurant closed down because they were being asked to, check people's medical records and enforce these unconstitutional mandates that the government is cramming down the throats of businesses here in LA and in other cities in America. Even before that, hundreds and hundreds of businesses, restaurants in town. I can't remember the statistics, but I'm pretty sure it's over 50% of all restaurants in Los Angeles have closed down since March of 2020. And that is, again, not because of COVID, but because of government restrictions. And these, in some cases, are restaurants that have been, working for years, if not decades, to build up to the point where they are, and are now being forced to close because bureaucrats and politicians are deciding that they're not to survive. Essentially, they're cutting them off at the knees and making it impossible for these businesses that already It's already hard enough to run a restaurant as it is, and now they're being asked to, you know, move all their dining outside, or force everybody wear masks, or check credentials at the door. All this bullshit is costs on these businesses that makes it harder and harder and harder for them to survive. So the businesses that are surviving are the biggest of all the businesses. Small business is being suffocated, it's being destroyed, and it is the backbone of the American economy. People's livelihoods are their lives for a lot of people. It's like the resources that they need to survive. It's as simple as that. So the idea that the government is doing this for people's safety is complete and utter nonsense. It's insane that we're still going along with it. I'm so sick of this bullshit. I'm sick of watching these hardworking business people getting pushed out, getting driven out of the city by these insane, power-hungry, authoritarian bureaucrats and politicians. So my friends are part of a long list of restaurant owners who have been put out of business. Again, not by COVID, but by government restrictions. So now they're being asked to take one more drastic step, just checking people's medical records prior to entry. So this was the final straw for them. They're packing up, they're taking their kids out of school, and literally fleeing California, specifically Los Angeles, like so many people have in the past year and a half. The oppressive rules are making it extremely difficult to run a business or even live a normal life. So my wife and I are also being driven out of the city. We have a really, really sweet, beautiful living situation here, right near the beach, close to family and close to friends, and we're being driven out of the city because we can't take it anymore. Like they have made the city unlivable, and it's just tragic to watch this happen so unnecessarily. So let's see. So for those who choose not to take this vaccine for any reason, many of which are legitimate, such as allergies to ingredients, religious beliefs, natural immunity, or others, a lot of people are literally going to be put in danger by being forced to take this shot. They're allergic to one or another of the ingredients that are found in the vaccine, some of which are toxic chemicals that I don't believe anybody should be injecting to their vaccine or into their bloodstreams. But that's a personal choice. I believe anybody should have the right to do that if they want to. But people have legitimate reasons not to be taking these things, including a direct recommendation from their doctor, and the information that it could be very dangerous, if not fatal, for them to do this. And despite that, none of these people are able to get exemptions, and they're being pushed out of their jobs and their livelihoods taken away, and essentially being outcast from society for the refusal to accept an experimental medical injection. So this is nothing if it's not tyranny. This is medical authoritarian bullshit, and it's creeping into cities and states all over the United States and places all over the world. So let's see. These people are essentially deemed as second-class citizens and excluded from businesses that are choosing to follow the rules. It should be noted that some businesses are refusing to follow these rules, and I believe for good reason. I believe it's the moral thing to do to not be following these unconstitutional, unlawful mandates. So here are some statistics. These are from early November, so they're no longer accurate, and the numbers are most likely higher at this point. They must be. But the U.S. government reports 18,461 deaths and 875,653 adverse reactions from the shot as of early November. There's an estimated 8% of the U.S. population that is at risk of anaphylactic shock due to any vaccine that contains polyethylene glycol. alarming rates of myocarditis and pericarditis, which is heart inflammation, are occurring in adolescents post-injection. So yes, I know a lot of people have died from the illness that we're currently obsessed with and trying to avoid. But is anybody actually doing the cost-benefit analysis on this thing? Young people, it's pretty clearly scientifically demonstrated at this point that if you're below a certain age, the vaccine is actually more dangerous than getting COVID. Young people are not dying from COVID, especially children. The numbers are vanishingly small as compared to the number of adverse reactions that are coming from the vaccine. So we're in this strange place in our lives where we're, for some reason, some powers that be have decided that we are really willing to risk the health and safety of our children in order to protect the health and safety of the oldest and sickest among us. Now, does anybody think that this prioritization is backwards? Because this vaccine is not without risks. It's been very clearly demonstrated that it's not without risk. The idea that we're going to force it on people, and specifically force it on children, is clearly, obviously wrong. It's immoral. It's in my opinion, it's actually evil. It's like wherever this is coming from, it is not coming from a place of the greater good and safety for all. There's clearly some ulterior motives here, and you can do a lot of speculation about what you think those are, but I'm gonna just keep reading the thing I wrote. So we've taken a sledgehammer approach with policies, destroying many other things, sacrificing basic freedoms, and essentially accepting and sometimes embracing totalitarian policies without succeeding in stopping the virus. So how much tyranny are we willing to accept for the illusion of safety? Scientists basically agree that the virus is endemic at this point, much like influenza. They also agree, based on mountains of data, that you can still catch and pass the virus with the vaccine. So why are we mandating a procedure that kills some people and seriously damages others, even when you can still catch and pass the thing that we're trying to stop? Does that make any logical sense to you? Is anybody else going insane watching this shit go down? It defies logic and common sense over and over again. And we're constantly being lied to and misled by our so-called health officials and by our bureaucrats and politicians who are just moving and moving and moving these goalposts. Like, how long is too long? How long are we willing to forego living ordinary lives, to literally be dehumanized and subjugated by our government leaders for the sake of killing a virus? Can you even kill a virus? Is a virus alive? Procedure that kills some people and seriously damages others. So even when you can still catch and pass the thing that we're trying to stop. So how many people is it moral to sacrifice to save the lives of others? So how many people is it moral to sacrifice to save the lives of others? It's an interesting question. Or to slow the spread. How long are we going to spend in giving up our lives in order to slow the spread? 15 days to flatten the curve? Anybody remember that? Anybody remember when the vaccines were going to come along and save us? And after the vaccines were out, then we were going to be able to go back and live our normal lives. Anybody remember when the vaccine passports were considered a right-wing conspiracy theory? Well, it may have been a conspiracy theory, but the theory was accurate because we're right now laying the framework for an authoritarian surveillance state. And this in my opinion, this is one of the worst things that we could possibly do. Giving away more and more of our privacy and our freedom for this complete illusion that somehow the government can keep us safe from a pathogen, from a virus. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And we're giving up more and more of our rights in pursuit of this impossible goal. All right, so dying in old age from catching a virus and dying from a forced government injection are two very different things. One is fairly natural. The other is a violation of the Nuremberg Code, and it's immoral, unethical, and just, it's insane that we're doing this right now. So here's the first line of the Nuremberg Code. And this is about experimental medical procedures. And anybody who is honest will agree with you in saying that this here is an experimental medical procedure. We all know that it is. We don't know what the long-term effects are going to be. And we're doing a mass experiment on humanity, including on our children, who, again, are at practically zero risk of serious consequences from COVID. Many of them have already had it and have not been symptomatic and therefore have robust natural immunity. But for whatever reason, we're living in a country whose politicians and bureaucrats deny, despite all scientific evidence, that natural immunity exists. So this is kind of an anomaly. An anomaly. I'm not saying that word right. Anomaly is the word that the United States is doing. There are a lot of countries who are being very tough with COVID restrictions, but are still acknowledging natural immunity. And they're not masking children in school. They're not forcing children to get vaccinated. They understand that it is the job, the responsibility of the adults in the scenario to protect the children. It's not the responsibility of the children to sacrifice, to take a risk, to take an injection in order to protect the adults. It's not how it works. All right, so the first line of the Nuremberg Code: the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have legal capacity to give consent, should be so situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion. Any of that sound familiar? Also, should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter involved as to enable him or her to make an understanding and enlightened decision. This latter element requires that before the acceptance of an affirmative decision by the experimental subject, there should be made known to him the nature, duration, and purpose of the experiment, the method and means by which it is to be conducted, all inconveniences and hazards reasonably to be expected. This is something that we're clearly not doing. People are pulling up in parking lots and just getting shots. You're not being told of the risks that they are undertaking. And the methods and means by which it is to be conducted, all inconveniences and hazards reasonably to be expected, and the effects upon his health or person which may possibly come from his participation in the experiment. All right, are we following that code? Nope, clearly not. Line 5 of the Nuremberg Code is: no experiment should be conducted where there is an a priori reason to believe that death or disabling injury will occur, except perhaps in those experiments where the experimental physicians also serve as subjects. Okay, so I guess you could argue that the experimental physicians are also serving as subjects, but I don't think that those ends really justify the means. So here it is again. What I consider to be the most important part is the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. I don't know any honest people who will tell you that this is not an experiment. We all know it is. Therefore, it is unethical to force people to participate. It's the largest science experiment in the history of the world. The results are coming in, but we will not know for years or even decades the full extent of the damage. And again, the results are that people can still transmit it and they can still get sick from it if they've been vaccinated. So why are we still pushing forward with this insane attempt to get everybody vaccinated? Is it simply to slow the spread? Is that the whole? And if we keep slowing the spread, is that just going to prolong the misery here? That's what I've been wondering the whole time. Like, are we just like, if we can't stop the spread, but we just keep slowing it, is it like, you know, instead of pulling the Band-Aid off, we're just like just prolonging the misery for 2 to 5 years or what, however the fuck long this shit is going to go on for. All right, so a couple more anecdotes and I'm going to be done with this. Just had to get some of this stuff off of my mind. The craziest part about this for me has been watching the treatment of children. So just, you know, you can argue all you want about whether or not you think getting vaccinated is the right thing to do, or wearing masks all day is the right thing to do. I obviously have my own opinions about that stuff, and everybody else is entitled to that too. But the way that we're treating children during this pandemic has been absolutely reprehensible. And so I'm going to get into a couple examples, anecdotes from their experiences of being in LA City schools. So the same family whose restaurant was closing down told me a couple other stories. They told me that they were pulling their children out of school because of horrific conditions. Their kids, who are at a minuscule risk of severe COVID, like all kids are being forced to spend a full day, every day in school, masked up, even outdoors, while doing strenuous activity. So there's nothing scientific about this shit at all. Especially the outdoor masking of children during athletic activities. Like, you don't need to be a scientist to understand that that's a bad idea. Like, you don't cover your face and breathe in your own recycled CO2 when you're doing strenuous exercise. Especially, like, it's not helping. There's no proof that there's significant spread of this thing outdoors. Literally none. And we're still forcing this, like, torture upon children. So the data shows that childhood depression and suicide are drastically, far and away, at an all-time high. But it doesn't take a scientist, again, to know that spending a full day in school masked up, even during outdoor physical activity, is not healthy at all. It's just fucking obvious. Like, I can't believe that we're doing this. In fact, I would argue that it's basically physical and psychological torture. It's not natural. It's not safe. It's not moral. I remember how long those days could be sitting in school. You're listening to your teacher, learning about something that you may or may not be interested in. And now imagine that you're just being gently deprived of oxygen, unable to speak, breathe, or communicate properly. It's dehumanizing to have a mask on all day. It takes away, it shields your identity. And it's a tactic that has been used on slaves all over the world. They literally put masks on them so that they do not feel human, less than human. And we're like, our schools are like prisons right now. That's what's happening. So kids as young as preschool age are being yelled at and disciplined for taking their masks down. Unvaccinated children are being targeted by the other kids, not for a decision that they made themselves, and clearly coming from behavior modeled by the adults. The worst thing these parents told me was this. A teacher in a 5th grade classroom asked all the children to raise their hands if they were vaccinated. One girl in the class did not raise her hand. Not only was she subject to ostracization, but the other kids followed her out of class, mocking her, threatening her, and eventually pushing her down the stairs. That was LA City Schools. So I've heard a variety of other horror stories from my friends with school-aged children. They're it's just an absolute travesty what's going on in these schools. And for whatever reason, many parents are simply just looking the other way, or even they think that we're doing the right thing. And so again, I ask you, like, since when are we willing to sacrifice the health and the mental, physical health and well-being and spiritual well-being of our children for for the elderly or whoever, like the immunocompromised? And let's not forget, all those people have had the opportunity to be vaccinated at this point, and we're still masking kids all day in school. It's just horrible. I can't believe this bullshit is still going on. All right, so what do you actually like? How do you fight this? That's the question. It seems to me, and the tactic that me and my wife are doing is we're creating a parallel reality. We are not willing to exist in this reality. We're being pushed out of the city because, again, politicians and bureaucrats have made it unlivable here, and we're just sick of it. We're sick of all this bullshit. So what can I say? I mean, speak up, get organized, take your kids out of school. It's also like all this stuff, all this totalitarian garbage is taking place right now because we are all going along with it. You know, the people who are making these rules are few and we are many, and the people have the power. There's this, here's how I believe the pyramid goes. It goes like this: God, we the people, governments. That's the order. The government seems to think that they can go up here all the way at the top of this pyramid, that they can decide who lives and who dies. They can decide who gets to run their business and who doesn't, who gets to participate in society and who doesn't. We need to stop just giving away our rights willy-nilly and start standing up for what we believe in and standing up for what is right. Because this shit is just plain wrong. It's just plain wrong. It's driving me crazy. I mean, it's really been crazy to watch the oppression that these people are willing to press down on the people for the sake of safety. Like, God, it's crazy. It's just crazy. So what else? At this point, any person in America who would like to be vaccinated has taken that step. So if the vaccines work as advertised, these people, anybody who is choosing to be, is as protected as they're going to be. So here's the question. Are any of these vulnerable people actually the ones asking for these insane measures? Or is it just power-hungry bureaucrats and politicians taking their orders from on high, trying to make it look like they're tough on COVID, when really it seems like they're pushing some totally different agenda? Or worse, is it the world's biggest drug cartels making sure that everybody must take their product? It's amazing to think that these companies basically control the media, the governments, the medical corporations, the medical schools, the regulatory agencies such as the FDA and the CDC, and are now forcing an experimental injection on the world's population for which they have no liability. Yep, definitely nothing to see here. It's all for your safety. So I'll say it again. Remember when the vaccine was going to save us all? We could all be safe from the scary virus, and we could stop pretending that everybody is sick. We could finally breathe and laugh and smile together. Personally, if I was in the place of being old and vulnerable, there's no reality, no possible chance that I would be saying, yeah, the kids need to wear masks all day so that I can be safe. And while you're at it, give them an experimental injection just in case. Get the fuck out of here. Like, who's saying that? Who thinks that shit? If you got the vaccine, you're as protected as you can be according to the advertisements, everything we've been led to believe by the governments and the media. And so let's just cut out this fucking bullshit. I'm so sick of it. I'm so fucking sick of it. All right. I don't know. I could just keep ranting on and on about this, but it's not how I want to spend my evening, and I'm sure it's not how you want to spend your evening. So I don't want to end this on a positive note, which is that part of what I believe is going on here is we're being conditioned. We're being conditioned to accept orders and mandates and restrictions step by step by step by step. This is called the totalitarian tiptoe. And again, the framework for an authoritarian surveillance state is being laid right now. That's what the vaccine passport is. That's what's happening right now. That's where we're going with this. So if we continue to comply and allow all this to happen, that framework is going to be there. And what governments decide to do with that framework next is anybody's guess. But you could, for instance, look at places like Australia if you want to see the scary reality of where this could be going. If you don't know, the government of Australia is detaining people without due process, not simply for testing positive with COVID, but even for suspected contact with somebody who tested positive with COVID. They're being held for extended periods of time in questionable conditions against their will. And this is basically a concentration camp. That's what's going on. Australia has concentration camps right now. And it's like when you listen to Holocaust survivors talking, one thing that you hear over and over again is they just talk about this step by step, this gradual creep. Like the Jews are not allowed here, they're not allowed there. And now they can only buy their groceries after 5 p.m. And now they can only, step by step. And I'm not saying that's what this is, but I'm saying these are the warning signs. If you don't stand up well before it's too late, and then all of a sudden it's too late. All right, so I made the statement that I wanted to end this on a positive note, and then I had to get into all that shit. So what I want to say is that this fear programming does not work if you don't go along with it. That's what the mask is, a symbol that teaches you to be afraid. It's saying everybody is sick, anybody could make you sick, and nobody is safe. It's not safe out in the world. It's constantly programming people to be in the state of fear. And when people are in a state of fear, they're much easier to control. So my message when the end of this is not to focus on all the insane, horrible bullshit that's happening right now all the time, but merely to be aware of it and focus on what it is that you are creating. So creating the life that you're wishing to see, creating the community or the circumstance where you can live outside of these insane mandates and restrictions that the governments are putting upon us. And even in your day-to-day life, so that you can live outside of the fear programming that is constantly being pushed by the media, by the government, and by these powerful institutions. So it is not our natural state to live in fear. We do not have to live in fear. And so what I suggest instead is that you live in awareness, live in love, understanding, and compassion. Live in a mind state that can bring you closer to the reality that you want to be existing in, and in fact can put you in any moment in that reality simply by embodying those feelings, those emotions, and that state of mind. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed my rant. here is to truth, love, and freedom. May your days be filled with love and abundance. Peace, everybody.